Odds I get through this whole thing without getting a drop of barbecue sauce on my shirt. This is so different from my usual like cake, frosting, cream, barbecue brisket sliders. Hi everyone, I'm Nia. Welcome back to another episode of Recipe Drop. Today we're making barbecue brisket sliders, and I'm actually using my grandma's brisket recipe, which is delicious, and it comes together really easily. It's also a really good low and slow recipe, and barbecue brisket is a classic in the summer. What we're gonna do is roast the brisket for a few hours, then I'm gonna make some barbecue sauce, and then assemble the sliders, and that's really it. So let's get started. So I have a 4-pound brisket here that I actually got from the butcher shop. Look at how nice this looks. Pretty marbled, and it also doesn't have a huge fat cap on it, which you can see here. Sometimes you actually don't have to cut it off, but I usually like to trim it regardless, so I'm glad that they cut a little bit off here. Just before this goes in the oven, I'm gonna season it pretty generously with salt and pepper. The rest of the seasoning is gonna come from the barbecue sauce that we're gonna add later. If your brisket does come with a really thick fat cap, you can either roast it fat cap down, or you can roast it fat cap up. If you roast it with the fat cap on top, then all the fat will kind of melt down over the brisket. So it's kind of up to you, whatever you want to do. And here I have a 9 by 13 inch baking dish. I actually like to call this my one dish brisket sliders because I roast the brisket in this, and then I also assemble the sliders in this as well. I like to have the fat cap on top just because I like that the fat melts down over. So I've also preheated the oven to 250 degrees. Low and slow is best for a brisket. I have made the mistake of roasting a brisket at like way too high of a temperature, and it just ended up pretty dry. So make sure your oven is at a low temperature. You could also do this in a crock pot, I think. Have you ever roasted a brisket in a crock pot? Yeah, I feel like that would also be really good. I think my grandma used to do that a lot actually. This is gonna cook in the oven for 4 hours. Usually the rule of thumb for a brisket is an hour per pound, and then maybe like an extra half an hour or so depending. Once the 4 hours are almost up, I'm gonna make the barbecue sauce. Let's head to the oven. I like these back ovens a lot because they're obviously high up, and I feel like it makes it easier to check on it sometimes. Okay, so the brisket has about 10 minutes left in the oven, so I'm gonna make the barbecue sauce, and it's a really easy homemade barbecue sauce. We have 2 cups of ketchup here, and you can assemble this, you can mix this together in a large bowl. I like to use a big measuring cup. I just find it's a little bit easier to pour out of. Then I have 1 cup of water, 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar, ½ a cup of brown sugar, and then I'm also gonna grate in 2 cloves of garlic. You can chop the garlic if you find that's easier. I always feel like the easiest option is to grate it in. And any of these like big leftover pieces, I like to just add as well. My grandma used to make this. Actually, she didn't used to make the sliders, but she used to make the brisket and then cut it up and then serve it on a platter with baked beans, and it was so good. And we always had it in the summertime. So that's kind of what inspired me to make this. So now I'm just whisking this together, and I'm not gonna add any more salt because there's already salt on the brisket, and there's also a lot of salt in the ketchup. Literally, that's all we're gonna do. So I'm gonna set that aside, and I'm gonna go get the brisket. The brisket is done for the most part. I'm gonna pour off all this liquid that has come out of the brisket, all the fat and whatnot. Well, we found that there's actually a big debate of whether you put the fat cap on top or on the bottom, and I guess it's more so because of aesthetics, and also apparently it's a really common thing to do in Texas. If you're from Texas, let me know if you do this. Usually I would maybe save this to use it for like I don't know, a sauce or something, but I mean, we're still leaving a bunch of yummy stuff here on the bottom of, we have some leftover fat. Now I'm gonna pour over all the homemade barbecue sauce, and I also increased the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is gonna cook for another 30 minutes until the barbecue sauce is nice and caramelized and the meat is a little bit more cooked, and it's gonna smell amazing and it's gonna be delicious. Let's go put this back in the oven for another 30 minutes uncovered. So while we wait, I'm gonna do some quick caramelized onions. I'm gonna just slice 2 yellow onions, and we're gonna cook them low and slow until they're nice and golden brown and smell and taste really nice and like caramelized. I'm gonna caramelize these onions in this really beautiful stove pan. It was actually Food52's collab with Stove. And so we have this color in turmeric, and then we also have a color called sesame, and I just think they're really nice, and they're actually on sale right now. So check out the link below. But anyway, so I'm gonna start with 2 tablespoons of butter. Oh my God, I used to have to make like pounds and pounds of caramelized onion at one of my jobs, like big vats of it. It took forever. At this restaurant in Burlington that I used to work at when I was like 16. I have this over medium-high heat right now. I'm just gonna cook them until they're super softened and golden brown. I'm also gonna decrease the heat to medium-low just to make sure that they don't brown. And if you're making like a true caramelized onion and you're really doing the low and slow, then you obviously cook them over much lower heat for a longer period of time. While those cook, I'm gonna slice up a block of cheddar. So I'm just slicing very thin slices to put on top. You could also use shredded or pre-sliced if you prefer. Okay, the brisket just came out of the oven. It smells amazing. And I did actually also let this rest for about 15 minutes. This just keeps some of the moisture inside the brisket. I'm gonna transfer it directly onto this cutting board that I have behind me. All right, so I'm just kind of letting the excess barbecue sauce drip off the brisket. I mean, look how incredible that looks. It does look a little bit smaller, and that's because brisket shrinks about 1/3 of the size after cooking. So I'm gonna pour off all the barbecue sauce. That's now cooked with that extra like leftover meat juice and meat fat. And I'm gonna rinse this, and then we're gonna assemble the sliders. Moment of truth. Ooh, that looks so good. Now I'm just slicing this into like finger thick slices, and then I'm gonna chop it up and toss it with barbecue sauce. So if you didn't want to make the sliders, you could just stop here and you could serve this with the sliders or with the buns on the side. You could also make some baked beans on the side, how I was saying. I usually have it earlier. Ooh, with mashed potatoes. Yes, with mac and cheese. All right, so now I'm just gonna go in and kind of cut it up in like small pieces. All right, if you're at home, maybe do this in batches because this cutting board is a little small. This is why I don't cook meat very often. I have the brisket, and now I'm gonna pour in all the barbecue sauce. And now I'm just gonna kind of toss this gently until all the little pieces of brisket are completely covered in barbecue sauce. It probably would look better if I shredded it, but that'll be next time. And if you want to shred it, you can do that. To assemble, we have rolls, we have the brisket, we have the caramelized onions, and we also have the cheddar. Sometimes they come in a whole sheet, and in that case, I would cut them, just like cut the tops off the bottom in like one go, but these came in kind of individual buns. So I'm gonna place them down like this. And it's nice to have a deeper baking dish for something like this rather than a shallow one because we're gonna build them up, so they're gonna come up over the top a little bit. Now I'm gonna go in with all the brisket. And you, of course, don't have to use all of it. I guess we'll see how much makes sense. This actually might be a lot for these. And I'm going in with the caramelized onions. And I'm gonna add a lot of cheese. So as you can see, I didn't end up adding all of it. I think this would be really good if you had a few more buns, or if you really want to stack them on there, it's up to you. But I want these really cheesy. Now I'm gonna go back in with the buns, and then we're gonna brush them with some melted butter to help get them really nice and golden on top. If you're feeling extra fancy, you could add a little bit of garlic to the butter. You could also add some parsley or some other herbs if you want. I think I am gonna sprinkle the tops with a little bit of salt as well. All right, finishing off with a little bit of salt on the top. I love a salted crusted anything, especially like a salt bagel. So good. In the oven. Okay, so I took them out of the oven. I brushed them with a little bit more butter. They're a little bit more toastier than I would have liked them to be, honestly, but you know what? That happens. The cheese is nice and melted though. And better toasted than untoasted. Little onion, little cheese. Nice. Not too mad about it. Let's have a bite. Ooh, this is messy. It's really good. The barbecue sauce is just as I remember it. The cheese and the caramelized onions are the cherry on top. I feel like it's such a good combination. And if you want to do what I did, which was brush them with a little bit more of melted butter and sprinkle some parsley on top, that's also just an added bonus and kind of covers up a little bit of the toastiness. So yeah, if you want this recipe, you can find it linked below in the description. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.